The first phase is known as the resistance phase that remained from 1917 up till 1948. This was the phase, as I told in my earlier video, that it was basically the phase in which the Israel-Palestine conflict was evolving, and we can trace the historical traces of the evolution of this particular conflict in that particular period of time. Briefly, I tell that in this particular phase, what is known as the resistance phase from 1917 up till 1948, it was marked by the British mandate rule in Palestine, roughly from 1922 up till 1948, in which large-scale Jewish migration took place, resulting into the discontent between the indigenous Arabs and new settlers and the British. After the World War II, the United Nations proposed a partition plan as per the UN General Assembly Resolution 181. This resolution basically proposed for a two-state solution and considering Jerusalem as a international city. The Arabs, they rejected the plan that led to the first Arab-Israel war in 1948. This was basically the tensions in which the Israelis or the Jews, they declared independence on May 14, 1948. The British mandate expired on May 15, 1948. It was the day once the neighboring states of Israel, they attacked Israel on that particular day. Israel announced its establishment as a formal state. However, this war, as I discussed earlier, that it resulted into a kind of catastrophe. We call it as Nakba. This was a huge scale destruction, and there were around more than 700,000 displacements of the Palestinian people who were pushed towards Gaza and the West Bank, and it was basically resulted into a kind of catastrophe. Ultimately, the UN Security Council implemented ceasefire on May 29, 1948. The second phase is known as the intermediate phase. This phase remained from 1949 up till 1967. In this particular phase, there were around two wars that took place. One was the 1956 war, and the second was the 1967 war, or why we call it as the Six-Day War. The Palestinian issue converted into the Arab-Israel issue, leading to the two wars, as I told. The first war broke between Egypt versus Israel, UK, and France over the Suez Canal. It was a period in which we see that there was the establishment of two important organizations within Palestine. One was Al-Fatah, that was established in 1959, and then there was this larger organization that is known as the Palestinian Liberation Organization, PLO, that was founded in 1964. The Egyptian president Jamal Abdel Nasser led the Arab world in opposing Israel, and it was for that matter that in 1967 Egypt moved its troops in the Sinai Peninsula, expelled the UN peacekeepers, and blocked Israel's access to the Red Sea, that is Strait of Tiran, a major economic threat to the Israelis. Egypt formed military alliance with Syria and Jordan, increasing war fears. Perceiving the growing threat around its borders, Israel saw Egypt's action as an existential threat and carried out a preemptive strike. On June 5, 1967, Israel launched a preemptive airstrike, destroying almost 90% of the Egypt's air force on the ground. The Six-Day War of 1967 was a brief but a decisive conflict between Israel and the neighboring Arab states of Egypt, Jordan, and Syria. It reshaped the Middle East, leading to the Israel's occupation of the West Bank, Gaza Strip, East Jerusalem, the Sinai Peninsula, and the Golan Heights, and displacements of huge number of people. The war altered the Israel-Arab equation as Israel occupied large chunk of lands from all its Arab neighbors. This was the war in which Israel became one of the major important player because it has consolidated its power and it remained as it became as one of the leading player in the Arab-Israel equation. The third phase is known as the insurgent phase that remained from 1968 up till 1973. This was the phase in which there was a feeling of resentment, there was feeling of taking back the lost territories by Egypt and Syria, and this was basically the period in which this Palestinian conflict that turned into be an indigenous political movement by the Palestinians, who organized themselves amid the growing clash of interest between the Jordan and Palestinians, leading to the migration of the Palestinians to Lebanon. In 1970, after the Black September conflict in Jordan, the Palestinian Liberation Organization relocated its base to Lebanon. The PLO, led by Yasser Arafat, operated militant bases in southern Lebanon, launching attacks on Israel. In 1969, there was an important development took place, that was the establishment of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, OIC. This was the first international Islamic association that was established by these Muslim countries around the world, particularly in the response of a militant activity in Al-Aqsa mosque in Jerusalem, that basically that was arson attack on Al-Aqsa mosque in Jerusalem by an Australian extremist Christian, Dennis Michael Rohan. The Muslim leaders, they convened a special meeting in Rabat, Morocco, to form this organization of OIC that would defend Islamic holy sites and support the Palestinian rights. So this organization OIC was established in that pretext in this particular period. 6 years after the 1967 war, another war broke out between the Arab states and Israel in 1973. This war is known as the Yom Kippur War of 1973. This war took place from October 6 and it remained up till October 25, 1973. After Israel's victory in 1967 Six-Day War, it occupied the Sinai Peninsula from Egypt and Golan Heights from Syria. The Arab world, particularly Egypt and Syria, sought revenge and the return of their lost territories. Egypt's President Anwar Sadat and Syria's President Hafez al-Assad, they planned a surprise attack on Israel. Egypt and Syria launched a surprise attack against Israel on October 6, 1973, through a coordinated attack on Yom Kippur, the holy day in Judaism. The Egyptian forces crossed the Suez Canal and breached Israel's heavily fortified Bar-Lev line. Syrian forces, they launched an attack to retake the Golan Heights. After the initial losses, Israel regrouped and launched a strong counterattack. Israeli forces pushed Syrians back from the Golan Heights. In the Sinai, Israelis launched a counterattack led by General Ariel Sharon, crossing the Suez Canal into the Egyptian territory. The UN brokered a ceasefire on October 22, 1973, enforced by the US and the Soviet Union. Fighting continued briefly until October 25, when both the sides they fully complied with the ceasefire. Egypt transformed its approach towards Israel from competition to cooperation. This was the war in which the Egyptians they transformed their strategic thinking from competition and war towards peace, cooperation and friendship with Israel. The fourth phase is known as the Lebanese phase that remained from 1974 up till 1986. This was a phase in which there was a civil war within Lebanon, and there was repercussions and implications of that particular war to the Arab-Israel conflict as well. Lebanon, that is a neighboring state of Israel, was divided along the sectarian lines of Christians, Sunnis, Muslims, Shia Muslims, and Druze. The PLO's presence in Lebanon created tensions as the Christian factions opposed them, while some Muslim groups supported them. 5. A clash between the Christian flangists. In April 1975, a clash between Christian flangists and the Palestinian factions escalated into a full-scale civil war that lasted until 1990. The PLO allied with the Lebanese Muslim and leftist groups against Christian militias. They engaged into fighting. The Palestinian fighters, mainly based in southern Lebanon, were involved into battles with the Christian militias, particularly the Flangi Party and the Lebanese forces. The PLO's attacks on Israel from Lebanese territory led to the Israeli retaliation, further destabilizing Lebanon. In 1978, Israel launched Operation Litani to push the PLO out of the southern Lebanon. In 1982, Israel launched a full-scale invasion of Lebanon that is known as the Operation Peace of the Galilee to expel the PLO after the attempted assassination of the Israeli ambassador in London. Israeli forces, in alliance with the Christian flangist militias, besieged PLO headquarters in Beirut and forced the PLO to leave Lebanon. PLO ultimately relocated to Tunisia in 1982. After Israel took control of Beirut, Christian flangist militias carried out the Sabra and Shatila massacre that led to the killings of thousands of the Palestinian refugees in Lebanon. The massacre led to the international outrage, and Israel faced global condemnation for allowing the attack. The PLO's expulsion from Lebanon weakened, but it continued. The fifth phase is known as the Intifada I that remained from 1987 up till 1992. This was the phase in which the Palestinian people they turned to a guerrilla fighting against the Israeli occupation into their lands, and it was basically known as the social boycott movement, throwing stones against the Israeli forces. Indigenous uprising to replace PLO's guerrilla fighting activities is known as the Intifada that took place in two historical periods. One is known as the Intifada I from 1987 till 1992, and Intifada II that remained from 2000 up till 2005. The 1987 First Intifada in the occupied Palestinian territories shifted the Palestinian struggle from external armed resistance to the internal uprising. Lebanon remained unstable, leading to the rise of Hezbollah, a Shiite militant group supported by Iran. Intifada included widespread protests, strikes, boycotts, and civil disobedience, and stone throwing youth against the Israeli forces. Israel's response included harsh crackdowns, mass arrests, curfews, and the controversial break their bones policy ordered by the defense minister Yitzhak Rabin. In this particular period, there was a rise of an organization that is known as Hamas. In 1987, Hamas was founded as an alternative to the secular PLO, Palestinian Liberation Organization. Hamas was the face of the indigenous people who stood against the Israeli occupation and Israeli forces, particularly by employing some of the militant or violent means. Israel was condemned internationally on account of shooting on unarmed persons on purview of throwing stones. The sixth phase is known as the peace phase that remained from 1993 up till 2000. This was the phase in which there was a realization, particularly in Palestine, particularly by the PLO, Palestinian Liberation Organization, who basically reached to this conclusion that it is better to cooperate with the Israelis, and also it was brokered by the United States of America, for a cooperative solution to the problem of Palestine than to continued fight and compete with the Israelis and the foreign forces. The US-led efforts resulted into a Israel PLO rapprochement under the Oslo Accords that remained from 1993 and 1995, in which Israel and the PLO agreed to mutually recognizing each other. At the eve of the Cold War and the emergence of the New World Order, PLO recognized Israel after 40 years fighting and brought a formal end to their armed struggle. The Palestinian Authority was established for limited self-governance in parts of the West Bank and Gaza. Israel recognized PLO as the official Palestinian Authority in Palestine. Peace process and accords from Oslo 1993 and 1995 to the Wye River Accords of 1998, whatever conceded by the West and Israelis were the shallow promises and resulted into shambles, and they declined. However, Israeli settlements continued to expand, leading to the continued Palestinian frustration. The seventh phase is known as the Intifada II phase or Al-Aqsa Intifada that remained from year 2000 up till 2005. Again, this Intifada II was characterized by the widespread protests, uprising, violent clashes, suicide bombing, and the military operations leading to the thousands of the deaths on the both sides. The second Intifada started on 28th of September 2000 after Ariel Sharon, who was a Likud party candidate for the Israeli Prime Minister, made a visit to the Temple Mount, also known as the Al-Haram al-Sharif or Al-Aqsa Mosque, an area sacred to both the Jews and the Muslims, accompanied by over 1,000 security guards. He stated on that day, "The Temple Mount is in our hands and will remain in our hands. It is the holiest site in Judaism, and it is the right of every Jew to visit the Temple Mount." This visit was seen by the Palestinians as highly provocative, and Palestinian demonstrators throwing stones at police were dispersed by the Israeli army using tear gas and rubber bullets. A riot broke out among the Palestinians at the site, resulting into the clashes between the Israeli forces and protesting crowd. The US President Bill Clinton hosted talks between Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak and PLO Chairman Yasser Arafat to reach a final peace agreement. The summit collapsed due to the disagreements over Jerusalem, borders, refugees, and settlements. In the meantime, Mahmoud Abbas, a moderate supporter by the US, was appointed as the first Prime Minister of the Palestinian Authority on March 19, 2003. He officially took office in April 2003. However, he resigned from the office on September 6, 2003 due to conflicts with Yasser Arafat over control of security forces and decision making. The eighth phase is known as the post-Arafat phase because in 2004, Yasser Arafat died, he passed away, and then there was a new era in Palestinian for the Palestinians in the post-Arafat era. What happened is that in the post-Arafat era is that in January 2005, there was a presidential election that held. In that elections, Mahmoud Abbas was elected as the president of the Palestinian Authority. In these elections, the Hamas boycotted the elections. However, Mahmoud Abbas won the elections and elected as the president of the Palestinian Authority. After winning the 2005 elections, Mahmoud Abbas called for an end of the armed resistance and urged militant groups like Hamas, Islamic Jihad, and Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigades to disarm and integrate into the political process. However, internal rifts continued to grow that were witnessed in the next general elections in 2006. However, the internal rifts continue to grow between PLO and Hamas. The ninth phase is significant, that is the legislative elections in Palestine, that is known as the Palestinian Authority in 2006, because this was an election in which the people of Palestine, the Palestinian people, they elected their own representatives. The Palestinians were frustrated with the politics of Al-Fatah and gave Hamas a surprise majority victory. Hamas won a majority of the votes with 74 out of the 132-member Palestinian Legislative Council (PLC). Fatah, led by Mahmoud Abbas, traditionally the ruling party, won only 45 seats. Hamas' victory shocked the international community as it was considered a militant organization by Israel, the US, and the European Union. Western nations cut off financial support to the Palestinian Authority due to Hamas' stance on Israel. A power struggle between Hamas and Fatah led to the violent clashes in 2006 and 2007, resulting into two separate Palestinian governments, Hamas taking full control of Gaza, while Fatah retained control over the West Bank. The Palestinian Legislative Council became inactive due to the political divisions, and no new elections have been held since. These elections deepened the political divide between Hamas and Fatah, leading to the ongoing Gaza-West Bank split. Here it is also important to differentiate the differences between Hamas and PLO or Al-Fatah. Hamas differs with Al-Fatah and PLO on the ideological and political basis. Hamas is an Islamist movement that founded in 1987. However, Al-Fatah was a previous organization that was founded in 1960s. Hamas was inspired by the Muslim Brotherhood. It views the conflict with Israel as a religious struggle and advocates for an Islamic state in all of the historic Palestine. Whereas Fatah, also PLO, is a secular nationalist movement founded in 1950s and 60s by Yasser Arafat and now led by Mahmoud Abbas. It prioritizes nationalism over religion and has historically pursued diplomatic efforts alongside armed struggle. Hamas rejects Israel's right to exist and does not recognize agreements like the Oslo Accords. It supports armed resistance and does not engage in direct negotiations with Israel, whereas Fatah and PLO, they recognized Israel's existence, has signed the peace agreements such as Oslo Accords of 1993 and supported a two-state solution through negotiations. Fatah or PLO seeks to unify Palestinian factions under a single national movement. However, Hamas refuses to accept the PLO's leadership. In terms of the relationship with the international community, Hamas is considered as a militant organization by Israel, US, and the European Union and others. It receives support from Iran, Qatar, and Turkey, whereas Fatah and PLO is recognized internationally as the legitimate representative of the Palestinian people and works with the Western countries. After the 2006 elections, we see that Hamas now take its control in Gaza, whereas PLO, Palestinian Liberation Organization, it has its power in the West Bank. And this is basically the matrix, the political setup that has continued to exist in Palestine and Israel as of now. The 10th phase is basically Israel's Gaza offensive of 2008. By that particular time, from 2006 onwards, we see that there has been intermittent phases of violence, particularly led by the Israelis, and also it was reciprocated by the Palestinians. For example, in 2008, following Israel's opposition to Hamas due to its militant outlook, led to the Israel's 22-day Gaza offensive in 2008. The Gaza war, we know it as the 2008 or 2009 war, is known as the Operation Cast Lead, that remained for 22 days in between December 2008 and January 2009. The offensive was launched after the increased rocket attacks from Hamas and other militant groups into the southern Israel following the breakdown of an Egyptian brokered ceasefire in December 2008. The war resulted into over 1,400 Palestinian killings and 13 Israeli killings. In this particular period, there was this Freedom Flotilla incident that took place in 2010. The Freedom Flotilla incident occurred on May 31, 2010, when Israeli forces intercepted the MV Mavi Marmara, a Turkish ship, part of the humanitarian flotilla attempt to break the Gaza blockade. The raid resulted into the 10 Turkish activists killing, straining the Israel-Turkey relationship and sparking global condemnations. The 11th phase is the intermittent use of force from 2011 up till 2020. This was a 9 or 10 year period in which we see that Israel has resorted to the recurrence of use of force against the innocent Palestinians. Between 2011 and 2020, Israel and Palestine conflict saw multiple escalations, ceasefires, and diplomatic efforts, and continued Israeli settlements with key events that included the 2012 Gaza war, that is known as the Operation Pillar of Defense. That was an 8-day conflict between Israel and Hamas following the killing of the Hamas military leader Ahmad Jabari. Then in 2014, there was another Gaza war, that was Operation Protective Edge. That was a 50-day war caused by the rising tensions over the killing of the Israeli and a Palestinian teenager. It led to the thousands of the deaths, mostly Palestinians. In 2018 and 2019, there was the Gaza border protests, that is also known as the Great March of Return. These protests demanded the right of the return for the Palestinian refugees and led to the violent clashes with the Israeli forces. In 2021, there was this Gaza war, that is known as the Operation Guardian of the Walls, that triggered by the tensions over the Sheikh Jarrah evictions and the Al-Aqsa clashes. It resulted in 11 days of intense fighting between Hamas and Israel. After that, in 2020, there was a significant peace process, what we know as the Abraham Accords. This was the 12th phase in which we see that roughly it remained from 2020 up till 2023. This was the phase that is known as the Abraham Peace Accords, that was brokered by the United States of America to get the recognition of some of the Middle Eastern and Arab states to recognize Israel as an independent state. Particularly UAE, United Arab Emirates, and Bahrain, they normalized their ties with Israel and they accepted or recognized Israel as an independent state, sidelining the Palestinian issue. However, the 13th phase is known as the ongoing settlements and the raids led by the Jewish and the Israeli forces from 2021 and 2023. This 2-year period was known as the Israeli expansion in the West Bank and frequent military operations in the Jenin and Nablus that intensified the Palestinian resistance. Clashes in the Al-Aqsa Mosque, Israeli airstrikes on Gaza, and increased violence in the West Bank marked a deteriorating situation. Throughout these years, peace efforts remained unsuccessful, with cycles of violence, diplomatic stagnation, and humanitarian crises defining the conflict. This was basically the period I would consider in which the seeds of the conflict for another war of 2023 and 2025 were placed. This is the 14th phase, that is known as the Israel-Hamas war of 2023 till 2025. This is the last phase in which we are going through this particular Palestinian conflict. As discussed earlier, that how this conflict has erupted. on 7th October 2023, there was this Al-Aqsa flood by Hamas, a splinter group of Hamas that is known as the Al-Qassam Brigades. They carried out guerrilla fighting against Israel by firing around 3,000 to 5,000 rockets inside Israel, and also entering into Israel from multiple locations and capturing around more than 250 hostages. This recent episode of violence can be conceptualized as the Israel-Hamas war, or Gaza war, Gaza crisis, or the Red Sea crisis, with different actors involved, including Israel, Hamas, allegedly Iran, that allegedly support Hezbollah as well, Houthis in Yemen, and other militant groups such as Islamic Jihad. Israel's illegal occupation of the West Bank, Gaza Strip, and the East Jerusalem created lasting tensions and led to the intensified violence intermittently. So, given these 14 phases of the Palestine conflict, we see that what are the underlying causes of the conflict. The underlying causes of the conflict are the status of Jerusalem, refugees, borders, security, and above all, the recognition of the Palestinians' identity and their right for the self-determination and their right of statehood. Israel's resort to the violence and continued settlement exacerbates tensions and results in the sporadic and periodic violence, destruction, loss of lives, and insecurity. The 2023 war, which began on 7th of October 2023, concluded with a ceasefire agreement on January 19, 2025. This truce was brokered by the mediators from the United States, Egypt, and Qatar, following extensive negotiations. The agreement outlined a multi-phase process starting with a 6-week ceasefire during which humanitarian aid was to be allowed into Gaza. Despite the ceasefire, recent incidents have strained the truce. This event has raised concern about the fragility of the ceasefire and the potential for the renewed hostilities. By this period, reports indicate that there has been more than 46,000 Palestinians who have been killed, including 18,000 children that have been killed since the conflict's onset in October 2023. The struggle of the Palestinians and the Arabs for their right of self-determination continues, so as Israel's aggression. Nonetheless, there had been several efforts to resolve the conflict that we discuss in the next video.